Now, tens of thousands of people have been taking part in the funeral procession of President Ibrahim Raisi through the Iranian capital. The Supreme Leader Ayatollah Khamenei led the prayers for him and 7 others who died in a helicopter crash on Sunday. Correspondents say the public farewell is deeply political as Iran's ruling conservatives seek to project an image of unity and continuity. And we're looking at pictures of the scene in Tehran earlier today. Tens of thousands of Iranians lining the streets for the main funeral ceremony of the late President Ibrahim Raisi, his coffin draped in the Iranian flag and topped with his black turban. These kinds of scenes, the throngs of people surging through the streets. We'll see those pictures in a minute, but mostly men in turbans, women in long black shawls with their trademark shouts of death to America and death to Israel has, in a sense, become the signature of the Islamic Republic of Iran. And of course, today, from Tehran, President Raisi's body will be taken to Mashhad. That's his home city in the northeast. He'll be buried there tomorrow. On Sunday, he and 7 of his entourage were killed in a helicopter crash on a mountainside in northwest Iran that was shrouded by fog. He'd been widely expected to succeed the Supreme Leader Ayatollah Khamenei. But at this point, it's not clear what all this means for the future of Iran. But we'll keep you posted. Now let's return to our top story. And Palestinians have hailed as historic the recognition of their state by 3 European countries, Norway, Spain and Ireland. The presidency of the Palestinian Authority in Ramallah called on others to follow suit, but most reacted cautiously. By contrast, Israel has damned the move, which it called a reward for terrorism. The Foreign Minister, Israel Katz, said it dishonored the memory of the victims of the October the 7th attacks. Well, for more on these stories, let's speak now to Arise special correspondent Karl Bostic, who joins me on the line from Tel Aviv. Good to see you, Karl. What's been the official reaction to this move by Norway, Spain and Ireland to recognize Palestine as a state? I understand there's a lot of fury and rhetoric going on, and Israel has recalled its ambassadors to those countries.
That's right, Charles. You know, fury is maybe putting it mildly. We called their ambassadors. Already they're saying that the tax revenues that are collected on behalf of the Palestinian Authority to pay salaries there, that they're withholding them. Already about $1.5 billion of tax revenues have been withheld from the West Bank from the Palestinian Authority because of the war. Most of the tens of thousands of workers in West Bank have not received their salaries the past few months. So you have revenues being withheld. You've got this ambassadors being recalled. You also have, settlements in this occupation of the West Bank. Now, the security minister, Smotrich, is saying that settlements that have been evacuated in accordance with requests to prepare for a Palestinian state, they've now given the go-ahead for those for 3 settlements, one for each country that recognized Palestinian state, 3 settlements to be reoccupied. So they're saying that, and then in coordination with all of this, Charles, to show, going back to what you mentioned about rewarding terrorists, they released video only just now on the evening news here in Israel, where I am, Charles. Video seized from body cam footage by the Hamas fighters of what happened to the female hostages, female soldiers. 7 were kidnapped, taken to hostage. 2 were killed. 5 are still alive. And we saw them beaten up and bloodied and being told they'd be made pregnant. And they were saying that these are the kinds of people you want to reward statehood with. So that's the fury and anger that's coming from Israel this evening.
I mean, but Karl, the Israelis must have long expected this. I mean, so I would have thought that it wouldn't have come as a dramatic surprise.
Charles, once again, you put it very, very correctly, because I think there's so much. The short story is this, Charles. There's a lot of growing impatience with how this war has played out, with just the escalating humanitarian crisis, and there's horrific images coming out of Gaza. And now, what you're seeing here, Charles, is this: with the recognition of Ireland, Norway, and Spain of a Palestinian state as of Tuesday next week. It's symbolic more than anything else, Charles, but it means two or three things. First of all, it says that maybe we should change our approach to how we look at a Palestinian state. Maybe we should kind of veer away from the U.S., not wait for a permanent peace, which is what the U.S. is saying. We shouldn't let U.S. is saying we shouldn't let third parties dictate. And now what you have with these three countries recognizing it, they're saying that the U.S. does not own the peace process. We need to go in a different direction. So you have that for one. Secondly, Charles, you have a situation that this is really a precondition for expanded future recognition by regional states, Arab states in the region, beginning with Saudi Arabia, saying, listen, we can't even talk about normalizing with Israel unless there's a path to statehood. So that's a step in that direction, Charles. And then finally, thirdly, it's really kind of a signal to Israel that, with this government, as extreme as it is, because it's the most extreme government since 1940, the founding of Israel, you're going to be weaker and more isolated and a pariah. So that's the worry right there. But in terms of being symbolic, Charles, I'll just simply point this out. It's important because about 140 countries actually recognize the Palestinian state in the UN, but most of them are, not in Europe. And that's what's significant. These are European Western countries. That's what's new, Charles. It would be a big deal if you had Germany or France recognizing it. And then finally, Charles, all this simply does is it upgrades their status from observer state. They can now sit in debates. They can propose agenda items. But it all comes down to Security Council, Charles. And when this vote was passed earlier this month in May, about 10 days ago, the U.S. used its veto because the U.S. is adamantly saying that there's just no way we're going to accept recognition without direct negotiations. So that's why we're so far away from this. And in fact, even today, Charles, Belgium, which was considering it, the government was simply saying that, listen, if we vote to recognize, we can only do this once. And if we vote to recognize, we want it because there's going to be an end to a war and the release of the hostages. And that's why other European countries like Malta or Slovenia have also withheld their recognition.
And Karl, what about the ordinary people of Israel? I mean, this must be something of a blow for them, coming in the same week as the International Criminal Court requested arrest warrants for their prime minister and foreign minister.
That's right, Charles. You're absolutely right. It's really a psychological blow because now we're into the 8th month of the war. I've been here now in the 8th month. It's been a lot to see. And actually, the resolve has hardened. They feel as though, if anything, especially with the release of these videos of these women soldier hostages, they feel as though they're doubling down, meaning doubling down is like, if we have to still go with a full-scale war in Rafah, we are prepared to do that. I mean, that's kind of really the attitude here. There's a real anger and bitterness and even a sense of betrayal. And that's why the U.S. is playing it very, very, very closely, Charles. But it's a real sense that they also recognize, Charles, finally, I'll add that the threat's not only from, what's happening in Gaza, but it's also the Northern Front. This evening, more crossfire coming from Lebanon, where Hezbollah is. So this is a war still with many fronts.
Indeed it is, Karl, and I guess as ever, I mean, you touched on this briefly earlier, the bottom line for Israel is what does their main ally and main military supporter, the United States, think? And at the moment, the US clearly takes the view not to recognize the state of Palestine.
Well, they favor a two-state solution, Charles. And for example, France's foreign minister said similarly, this is not a taboo topic. It's not a taboo topic at all, except the conditions are not there. And there needs to be, direct talks. But basically, Israel does not want to be seen as rewarding Hamas for the atrocities of October 7th. That's what it comes down to. And then, Charles, also, you have a lot of other stumbling blocks, if not almost impossible obstacles, because then you have to answer the question about then, well, who's the governing authority? They don't want the PA to have any role in the future Gaza. And then what are the boundaries of Gaza? They're saying that it should be pre-1967. Well, that's also another, big deal to go through. And then lastly, what would a Palestine state look like? Right now, you've got the West Bank separated from Gaza by Israeli land. And the Palestinians are saying that this needs to be contiguous. So what do? Do you give them Israeli land to complete that corridor? All things like that. And then the last question is this, Charles. A capital of a future Palestine would have to be in Jerusalem. And Israel has ruled that out because they just moved their capital to Jerusalem. So how do you get past all of that, Charles? And that's why this is still a very long way going, but this is a symbolic move. It's an important move, but it has to once again go to the Security Council. And that's where the U.S. has its leverage, actually, even against Israel.
Very interesting, very illuminating. Karl, thanks very much indeed. Karl Bostic is a RISE special correspondent. He was talking to me there on the line from Tel Aviv.